This video will take a look at the stock item console as well as some of the actions that can be performed on stock items inside the warehouse management system. So firstly, inside the merchant module we click on stock and that will take us straight into the stock item search. Alternatively, from any of the warehouse pages we can select stock item from the top and go to the item search there. So there's a number of different fields that we can search on at the top here, but we'll just return them all for now. So what we're looking at here are the individual items that are physically in the warehouse. We've looked at the parts search in some of the previous videos, which is really just the definition for the parts, the manufacturer codes that you stock, but the stock items are the physical items that potentially have a serial number sitting on them. So if we look at the first one here, we can see it's got a quantity of 5. The stock item number is an internal number generated by the eMark system just as a unique identifier. We can see the serial number if there's one attached. We can see the purchase order reference that's been stamped into it when the stock has been checked into the warehouse system. We can see the manufacturer and the manufacturer code. We can see whether it's a consumable. We can see the status, which typically is defined as either being new or second-hand or refurbished. We can see the location, so this is the warehouse that it's currently in. And then we have the designation and the state. So our stock management system actually uses 2 separate workflows that work hand in hand to manage the life cycle of a stock item. So for example, although this item is in storage, while an item can be in storage, it can then have multiple different secondary states. So for example, this one's in storage and it is available. Alternatively, it could be in storage and it could also be reserved by some other job or order or reservation. So that's why we do have 2 workflows there, because in most instances the single state wasn't enough to define where the stock item is and what it's currently assigned to be doing. We can then see a batch, and this will be covered off in a separate video, but essentially batches allow us to move one or more parts from a warehouse to another warehouse, and assign a con note to that batch as a whole. The transition drop down gives us some different actions that we can perform, and then the destination, if the stock item has been assigned to go to another warehouse to be transported, whatever the destination is what will appear in this column. We can also view the details of the stock item by clicking on the yellow magnifying glass. So if we take a look at some of the actions, when something's in storage, there's quite a few options that we can do. We can add the item to a batch, and we'll cover that off in a separate video. We can edit the serial number. We can edit the core details of the stock item. We can mark it as obsolete, which will put it into a closed state, similar to like a cancellation state. But we do, in addition to having an obsolete state, we've also got a scrapped state. So we can, if something's been thrown in the bin, for example, we can mark it as scrapped versus something being made obsolete. So from a reporting perspective, there's just a couple of different options there. We can merge items together, and this will be covered in another video in more detail, but what it basically allows us to do is merge for the one part here. If we wanted to merge all these quantities together and just cut it back to a single row, we could do that. We can move the item, which allows us to transport it to another warehouse. We can place it in repair, which will make it unavailable and adds that to the workflow history. And then we can also place it in storage, which is a quick way of just moving it to another warehouse instantly. So if we look at potentially moving a stock item, just select Move Item and click Save. So we're currently in the main warehouse and we want to move it to the Sydney warehouse. So we can see that the designation is still available buffer stock. It hasn't been consumed by any objects in the system, but it's now waiting for pickup. We can now also see that there's a destination. So once the item is picked up by a courier, we can dispatch it, and we can see it's now in transit. And then finally, the moment that it arrives at the other warehouse, we can place that in storage. And we've now successfully moved that to the Sydney warehouse. It's still in storage and it's still available. If we go back into the view page, so we can see all the main details of the stock item, we can see where it currently resides, the category, when it was created. Then we can also have a look at the journal here. So this is the workflow journal, which allows us to go back and look at the history of the individual stock item. This is obviously a lot more powerful if a unique serial number has been attached to the part. That way we'd be able to scan the serial number and take a look at where it's gone to, where it's come from, whether it's been in repair, and so forth.